Racist cop detains black woman at the gate, unaware her intel triggers a lockdown of his department. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Maya Harris, a calm and composed woman, had been traveling across the country for work. Her journey was nothing out of the ordinary, just another business trip for a high-level government agent. She had spent years under the radar, learning how to blend in, how to observe without drawing attention. Maya, an undercover FBI agent, was on a mission much larger than the average person could imagine. Her assignment had required her to travel quietly, without leaving any clues behind. But today, her mission was about to take an unexpected turn. As she approached the security checkpoint at the gate, she noticed a new officer working the line. Officer John Wilson. His gaze immediately fixed on her, scanning her with a look that suggested suspicion, even though there was no reason for it. He was new here, but already his behavior stood out. He made a judgment. Maya had seen it before. The way people made assumptions about her based on her appearance, the way they underestimated her. She could feel his eyes on her, sharp, critical. But she didn't flinch. She kept her posture strong, shoulders back, eyes forward. Maya was used to being underestimated. She had learned to remain calm, to never give away her intentions. But as Officer Wilson's hands began to move toward her bag, something inside her stirred. He was about to make a mistake. The officer's voice broke through her thoughts. "Ma'am, I'll need to check your bag," he said, his tone sharp and authoritative. Maya nodded calmly, not giving him a reason to escalate. She knew this was a routine stop, nothing unusual about it, but Officer Wilson had decided to make it something more. As he rummaged through her belongings, Maya's mind worked quickly. The intel she was carrying wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could mean disaster for national security. Maya had spent months gathering information, compiling evidence, and now she was so close to delivering it. She knew she couldn't let anyone interfere with her mission. She had prepared for this moment. When the officer paused, his hand hovering over a file tucked inside her bag, Maya met his eyes. She said nothing, but the intensity in her gaze made him hesitate. Something wasn't right. He didn't know it yet, but Maya wasn't just any woman. She wasn't just someone to be profiled and judged on her appearance. She was someone who held the power to dismantle the very system Officer Wilson was a part of. As the seconds ticked by, Maya remained composed, knowing full well what was at stake. Officer Wilson, on the other hand, was unaware that he had just crossed paths with the one person who could expose everything he was trying to hide. The situation was tense, but Maya remained unfazed. She could feel the weight of his gaze, but she refused to let it shake her. Today, everything was about to change. Maya stood still as Officer Wilson continued his search, a sense of urgency growing in the back of her mind. Her intel was too important to be mishandled, and she couldn't afford any distractions. The officer, oblivious to her true identity, was slowly going through her personal belongings with a casual air, tossing aside her travel documents and gadgets as if they were insignificant. Yet, Maya knew better. Everything in her bag had a purpose, each item carefully selected for her covert mission. As he reached for the folder tucked neatly at the bottom, her calm demeanor was the only thing preventing the situation from escalating. She remained composed, eyes fixed ahead, but every fiber of her being was alert. Officer Wilson's hand hovered over the file, his gaze never leaving her as he muttered to himself, still oblivious to the danger he was about to walk into. The air around them seemed to tighten, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Maya knew what would happen if he found the file. But just before his fingers could touch it, there was a shift in the air. The room, once filled with the ambient noise of airport activity, grew strangely quiet. Maya felt the weight of the moment. The officer's actions would determine the course of this mission. He had no idea that his actions were about to change everything. "What's this?" Officer Wilson's voice was sharp now, his suspicion growing. "It's a sensitive document, sir," Maya replied, her tone smooth, controlled. Her voice was calm, but her mind raced. The way he looked at her, with that dismissive air, reminded her of the many times people had underestimated her. People who assumed that being a woman, especially a black woman, meant she didn't belong in spaces of power. But they were wrong. She didn't need to raise her voice or make a scene. She simply had to wait for the right moment. The officer's eyes narrowed as he read the label on the folder. "I don't think I can let you go until I look through this," he said. Maya didn't flinch. She knew this was coming. As he started to open the folder, something inside her clicked. She subtly pressed a hidden button on her phone, sending a signal to her team. Maya had planned for this moment. She had expected a disruption, and now the lockdown of Officer Wilson's department had begun. What he didn't know was that Maya had already triggered a system-wide alert designed to bring down everything in his department if necessary. It was a fail-safe, and she was about to activate it. The officer, still unaware of what was unfolding, continued to scan the documents in the folder. His demeanor remained condescending, his assumption that he was in control growing with every second. But Maya was no longer just a passenger. She was an agent, and she had the power to bring his world crumbling down in an instant. Without even a hint of emotion, she watched him closely, knowing that the moment he finished reviewing the papers, the lockdown would be in full effect. The officer looked up from the folder, his expression unreadable. "I don't know who you think you are," he muttered, "but you're not getting away with this." Maya's lips curved into a subtle smile. "I already have." The moment the words left her lips, the room filled with the sound of distant sirens and the faint hum of security systems locking down. Officer Wilson froze, his eyes widening as the realization set in. Maya's calm was unshakable, but his panic was palpable. The tables had turned, and he now stood on the precipice of his own downfall. Maya's plan was already in motion. The once dismissive officer, now trapped by the very system he thought he controlled, was about to learn the hard way that justice wasn't something you could simply dismiss. Maya had been the calm in the storm. Now, she was the storm. As the security alerts rang out across the airport, Maya could feel the weight of the power she had quietly wielded. Officer Wilson's world was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Maya stood silently as the sirens echoed throughout the airport, their sound filling the air like a distant thunderstorm approaching. The once bustling terminal now seemed eerily quiet, the tension thickening with every passing second. Officer Wilson, still holding the folder, was frozen in place. His face shifted from confusion to realization as the lockdown of his department took full effect. He looked around, as if expecting someone to intervene, but there was no one. His grip tightened around the papers in his hand, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend what was happening. "What did you do?" he finally managed to ask, his voice shaking slightly. Maya's gaze never wavered from his. She stood tall, a figure of calm strength in the face of his growing panic. "I did what needed to be done," she replied simply. There was no anger in her voice, no need for harsh words. She wasn't here for confrontation. She was here for justice. And now, she had just triggered a chain of events that would change everything. The officer's expression shifted again, his arrogance replaced by the dawning realization that he was now caught in something far beyond his control. His authority, his badge, all of it meant nothing in this moment. "You don't understand," he said, almost pleading. "I'm just doing my job." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. He had already shown his cards, and they were nothing more than excuses to mask his ignorance and prejudice. The lockdown was complete now, and Maya could feel her pulse steadying. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment she could right the wrongs that had been allowed to fester for far too long. Officer Wilson, caught in his own web of assumptions and biases, was now part of the bigger picture. The system he had so blindly trusted had just turned on him, and there was no escaping it. As the realization spread across his face, Maya took a breath, knowing her team was already on the move. They were securing the data, ensuring that everything she had gathered was protected. The evidence would soon be in the right hands, and the truth would come to light. Officer Wilson's panic intensified as he fumbled with his radio, trying to reach his colleagues. But the communication system had already been compromised. It was too late. "This is a mistake," he muttered, almost to himself. Maya stepped forward slightly, her gaze never leaving his. "No," she said softly, "this is justice." Her words hung in the air, a quiet declaration that she had already won. Officer Wilson stumbled back a step, his world unraveling as he realized the full scope of what had just transpired. The power he thought he wielded, the authority he took for granted, was nothing more than an illusion. Maya didn't need to raise her voice or cause a scene. She simply had to take control of the situation, and she had done just that. The sound of footsteps approaching broke the tense silence. Maya knew that soon her colleagues would arrive, and Officer Wilson would be taken away from the scene. It was over for him. But for Maya, it was only the beginning. The weight of what had happened would reverberate throughout the department, a wake-up call that no one could ignore. As she turned to walk away, she knew the battle was far from over. This was just one victory in a much larger war for justice, and she was ready for whatever came next. Maya walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly in the now-empty terminal. The once bustling airport was still, almost as if it had been frozen in time. The tension she had felt moments earlier began to fade, replaced by the quiet confidence that came with knowing her mission had been successful. She didn't look back at Officer Wilson. There was no need. She had done what she came here to do, and now the wheels were in motion. Maya's phone buzzed gently in her pocket. She took it out, quickly checking the message from her team. Everything was going according to plan. The data was secure, and the evidence she had collected was already being processed. The lockdown had been a success. Officer Wilson's department was already under investigation, and his role in the corrupt system was now exposed. The power dynamics had shifted in the blink of an eye, and there was no going back. Maya had been in this game long enough to know that one victory was never the end. It was only the beginning of a larger, ongoing battle for justice. As she made her way toward the exit, she could feel the weight of the moment. But she also knew that the hard work was just beginning. This operation was one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The system she had just started to dismantle was vast, and there were more officers, more officials who needed to be held accountable. Maya didn't take pride in the destruction of others, but she understood the necessity of exposing the truth. Corruption, discrimination, and injustice ran deep in places like this, and the fight to uncover it would be a long one. But she was ready. She had always been ready. As Maya stepped outside into the crisp air, the world seemed unchanged. People moved around her, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed through. She wasn't looking for recognition or accolades. She was doing her job, just like everyone else. But for her, the stakes were always higher. She had seen firsthand how systems of power could turn a blind eye to the truth, how they could silence voices that demanded justice. She was tired of watching people like Officer Wilson get away with it. She was tired of being underestimated. As she climbed in her car and started the engine, she glanced in the rearview mirror. It was a habit she had picked up years ago, always checking her surroundings, always staying one step ahead. She knew this wouldn't be the last time she had to face someone like Wilson. There were more battles to be fought, more injustices to right. But for now, she had won, and that was enough. As Maya drove away, the road stretched out before her, an endless path of uncertainty and possibility. She didn't know what would come next, but she was ready. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, as she always had. And no matter what happened, she knew she was on the right side of history. Maya's car hummed softly as she drove through the quiet streets, the evening sky fading into shades of orange and pink. The city felt like it was unaware of the chaos that had just unfolded, a city of ordinary lives, oblivious to the quiet storm that had passed through the airport. But for Maya, the weight of what had happened would stay with her. She had known it was never going to be easy, but this victory, small as it might seem, was just the beginning. She glanced at the road ahead, her thoughts sharp and focused. There was still much to do. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. This time, it was a message from her superior, confirming the success of the lockdown and that the investigation into Officer Wilson's department was already underway. The data had been secured, and Maya's intel was being processed. There were no more loose ends. Still, she felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the kind she had learned to ignore but never fully forget. This was her world now, one where justice wasn't guaranteed, and every step forward came with a price. The silence in the car was only broken by the soft sound of the tires on the road. Maya knew she was being watched. She wasn't paranoid. She was just aware. The FBI didn't operate without scrutiny, and her actions today would definitely raise questions. She had done what needed to be done, but that didn't mean the repercussions wouldn't be felt. Even though she had taken down a corrupt officer, there were others, hidden deeper within the system, who would only see her as a threat. Maya had been in the field long enough to know that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones fought in the shadows. And those shadows could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. As she turned onto a quieter street, she slowed the car and took a deep breath. The house she pulled up to was modest, tucked away behind a row of trees, as though it was trying to remain hidden from the rest of the world. It was her home, a place she could finally exhale, if only for a moment. Maya had always kept her personal life separate from her work, but tonight, she allowed herself to think about it. Her father, a retired law enforcement officer, would understand the weight of her actions. Her mother, who had always insisted she choose a path that didn't put her in harm's way, would still worry, despite all the years Maya had spent proving she could handle herself. As she parked the car, Maya glanced at the message on her phone again. The investigation was moving faster than expected, and the ramifications were already rippling through the department. But she couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. There was too much at stake. Maya stepped out of the car, closing the door quietly behind her. The house was dark, except for the soft glow of a lamp in the living room. She walked inside, feeling the familiar sense of comfort that only home could offer. But even as she removed her jacket and sat down, she knew that this moment of peace wouldn't last long. She had just stirred a hornet's nest, and the real work was about to begin. Officer Wilson was only the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Maya had no illusions about how dangerous this would become, but she was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, as she always had. The weight of her mission had not eased, but Maya Harris was used to that. She had learned long ago that justice was never simple. It was a constant uphill battle. But she had always believed that every fight for what was right, no matter how difficult, was worth it. Maya woke up early the next morning, the dim light of dawn slipping through the curtains of her room. The world outside seemed peaceful, untouched by the whirlwind of events she had set in motion the previous day. But inside, she felt the familiar tension, the quiet hum of anticipation that only someone in her line of work could understand. The investigation was underway, and there was no turning back. Maya had always known that her job would never allow for simple victories. Every action, every decision, created ripples that could turn into waves. She had made the right choice, but she knew that the consequences would unfold over time. She took a deep breath, pushing aside the uncertainty, and got out of bed. The shower was quick, the routine automatic, but her mind raced ahead to the next steps. The system was vast, and Officer Wilson's exposure was only the tip of the iceberg. There were others, higher up, who were equally complicit. She had seen the signs, the way power corrupted those who held it. And now, she was part of a much larger mission to dismantle it, piece by piece. After getting dressed, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, her phone buzzing once again. It was a message from her superior, confirming that the lockdown of the department had caused a ripple effect. Several officers had already been placed under scrutiny, and more arrests were expected soon. But Maya wasn't just concerned with the immediate consequences. She knew that those who were exposed would not go down quietly. The system was rigged to protect its own, and there would be backlash. The phone buzzed again, this time a news alert. Maya opened the notification, reading the headline, Investigation into corrupt police officers expands after airport incident. She paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The media attention had begun. Her actions were now public, and she couldn't afford to let the spotlight distract her. Maya had always preferred to work in the shadows, far from the cameras and headlines. But now, she was in the midst of something bigger than herself. She could feel the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. She had made her mark, and there was no going back. But there was no time for self-reflection now. The investigation needed her, and the truth was still buried. She needed to keep moving forward. The phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a secure message from her team. The next phase of the operation was ready to begin. The next target was already identified. Maya's eyes narrowed as she read the message. This was a game of strategy, and every move mattered. She had to stay focused. She knew she would have to make tough choices along the way. The pressure was mounting, but she was used to it. She had prepared for moments like this. She finished her coffee, stood up, and walked to the door. There was no turning back now. As she stepped out into the quiet morning, Maya felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it with unwavering determination. The system would not remain intact for much longer. Maya was just getting started. Maya arrived at the office early the next morning, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the quiet space. Her team was already at work, their eyes focused on the screens in front of them, scanning data and tracking leads. It was a well-oiled machine, and Maya was the engine that kept it running. She took a deep breath as she walked to her desk, her mind still buzzing from the night before. The investigation was picking up speed, and she knew the next few days would be critical. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her attention back to the task at hand. The message was from her superior, confirming the next phase of the operation. "We got intel on a high-ranking officer. You're cleared to proceed." Maya's eyes narrowed as she read the message. It was what she had been waiting for. She had expected the investigation to lead to this point, but now that it was here, she couldn't afford to waste any time. There was no room for mistakes. She called a quick meeting with her team, each member arriving promptly and settling in around the table. Maya didn't waste any time. "We got a target. A high-ranking officer who's been under the radar until now. This is our chance to expose the system from the inside." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Maya's calm demeanor contrasted with the urgency in her voice. She had seen enough to know how dangerous this next move could be. "We'll move quickly and quietly. There's no margin for error." Her team nodded, their faces set with determination. They were all in this together, and Maya knew they had the skills and experience to handle whatever came next. The meeting was brief, and everyone returned to their stations, the buzz of activity resuming. Maya sat down at her desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she reviewed the intel. The officer they were targeting was well protected, with a network of allies that stretched deep into the department. This wouldn't be easy, but Maya was used to difficult missions. As she sifted through the information, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from a confidential informant, someone who had been feeding her information for weeks. "Maya," the voice on the other end was low and urgent. "They know you're getting close. You gotta move fast. They're already tightening security." Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you for the heads up. We're already on it." She hung up and immediately called her team together. "It's happening sooner than we thought. We need to act now, or we'll lose our chance." They sprang into action, each person moving quickly, gathering the last bits of intel and coordinating their next steps. Maya stood in the center of the room, watching her team work with a sense of pride. They were all professionals, each one playing a crucial role in the operation. Maya had no doubt they would succeed, but as the clock ticked down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was a sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. They were close. Too close to back down now. The plan was in motion, and nothing was going to stop them. Maya looked around the room at her team, their faces set with purpose. They were ready. The next phase of the operation was about to begin, and Maya Harris was at the helm. She had always been ready for moments like this. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it didn't matter. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. Maya stood in the dimly lit conference room, her eyes scanning the room where her team was gathered around the table, their expressions focused and intense. The final phase of the operation was about to begin, and the weight of the moment was settling in. Maya had been in situations like this before. Tension thick in the air, the feeling that one wrong move could bring everything crashing down. But this time felt different. This time, they were going after the core of the corruption. She could sense the shift in the room, the same feeling she had when a storm was coming. "All right, team," Maya said, her voice steady, yet carrying the sharp edge of someone who knew what was at stake. "This is it. We've been building up to this point, and we can't afford to hesitate. We move now or never." The room went silent as her team absorbed the gravity of her words. Maya had always been the calm in the chaos, the one who could see through the storm. She knew that, despite the danger, they had the tools to succeed. The intel was solid, and they had been preparing for this moment for weeks. The officer they were targeting had ties to multiple corrupt individuals, and they had finally gathered enough evidence to bring him down. Maya's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. She picked it up, glancing at the screen, her fingers moving swiftly as she read the incoming message. It was from her contact inside the department. "The operation is in place. You're clear to move." A small but satisfied smile tugged at Maya's lips. The pieces were finally coming together. She looked up at her team, meeting each of their eyes. "This is where we make our move. There's no turning back now. Stick to the plan, and we'll get this done. Stay sharp." Her words resonated with the team, their resolve hardening as they prepared to execute the plan. Maya felt the familiar surge of adrenaline running through her, but she kept her focus steady. They couldn't afford to get careless. They had come too far to fail now. The operation was delicate, with the highest levels of security around their target, but Maya had anticipated this. She had studied every angle, prepared for every possible outcome. The risk was immense, but the reward, justice for those who had been wronged, was worth every ounce of effort. As Maya and her team moved to their designated positions, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since this all began. The path she had chosen wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She had dedicated herself to uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. And now, as they moved closer to their goal, she knew that exposing the corruption that had plagued the department would be the first step toward real change. Maya looked at her team one last time before they moved out. "Let's do this," she said, her voice calm but full of determination. They nodded, their faces set with the same intensity that Maya carried. As they exited the building, Maya's mind raced with the final steps. Everything had to go perfectly. They couldn't afford a single mistake. She trusted her team, but she also knew that the higher the stakes, the more unpredictable things could become. As they made their way to their respective vehicles, Maya's thoughts shifted to the bigger picture. This was not just about taking down one corrupt officer. This was about dismantling an entire system of injustice. It was about holding people accountable, no matter how high they stood. As the car doors closed and the engines roared to life, Maya could feel the weight of what was coming. The time for waiting was over. The operation was in motion, and they were heading straight for the heart of the corruption. There was no turning back now. Maya was ready, and so was her team. Maya and her team arrived at the target location just before dawn, the quiet streets and empty buildings standing still as the world around them began to wake up. The city, unaware of the events about to unfold, felt distant from the danger that had been lurking beneath its surface. The plan had been set in motion, and now there was no turning back. Maya looked at her team as they parked their vehicles, their faces set with determination. Each member of the team had their role to play, and Maya knew they were ready for whatever came next. She trusted them all, but as the operation grew closer to its peak, a small part of her couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had led them here. There were no guarantees in this line of work. Not everyone would walk away unscathed. She had seen the cost of justice before, and she knew this mission was no exception. The tension was palpable as they moved toward the building. Maya's thoughts were sharp, her mind racing through the steps of the plan. Every move had to be precise, every action deliberate. They couldn't afford a single mistake. As the team split into their designated positions, Maya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was her world, the one she had trained for, the one she had committed herself to, and now the moment had arrived. She moved with purpose, her steps quiet but calculated. They had covered every detail, every possible variable, but Maya knew the true test would come when they were face to face with the heart of the operation. She glanced at her watch. Time was ticking. Inside the building, the officers they were targeting were unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Maya's role was crucial. She had to gather the final pieces of evidence that would bring down the corrupted officials within the department. She was ready. The plan unfolded with efficiency, each team member moving into place without hesitation. They communicated in silence, their actions coordinated with precision. Maya entered the building, her heart steady but her mind racing. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the culmination of weeks of work and countless hours of preparation. But as she moved deeper into the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had been in tight spots before, but there was a lingering unease in the air. Something didn't feel right. She shook off the thought, reminding herself that doubt had no place here. They had come too far. The door to the office creaked open, and Maya stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the room. The target was just ahead, the last piece in a puzzle that would bring down the corrupt network that had been operating in the shadows for far too long. Maya approached the desk, her mind focused as she retrieved the final set of documents that would expose the network. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind her, but she remained composed, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. The door opened, and an officer stepped in, his face surprised when he saw Maya. He recognized her immediately, his eyes widening in shock. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice shaky. Maya didn't answer right away. She knew the moment had come, the tipping point that would decide the success of the operation. With a calm, controlled voice, she spoke. "I'm here to end this." The officer took a step back, his expression shifting from surprise to fear. He knew what was coming. Maya had already triggered the security protocols. Within seconds, backup flooded into the room, securing the area and ensuring no one would be able to escape. The officer's face fell as he realized the game was up. His corruption, his alliances, all of it had been exposed. Maya watched as the officers took him into custody, her mind already moving on to the next task. The operation had been a success. The network was collapsing, and justice was being served. But as Maya walked out of the building, she knew this was only the beginning. There was more work to do, more layers of corruption to uncover. The fight for justice was far from over, but Maya Harris was ready for whatever came next. She had already proven that she wouldn't back down, no matter the cost. And she wasn't about to stop now.